Okay, afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Larchmont Public Library and O. Henry, it's me, your friendly local librarian, Frank Connelly. We got a couple stories today, things that you probably have never heard of. First one is why he hesitated. A man with a worn, haggard countenance that showed traces of deep sorrow and suffering rushed excitedly up the stairs to the editorial room of the Post. The literary editor was alone in his corner, and the man threw himself into a chair nearby and said, "Excuse me, sir, for inflicting my troubles upon you, but I must unbosom myself to someone. I am the unhappiest of men. 2 months ago, in a quiet little town in eastern Texas, there was a family dwelling in the midst of peace and contentment. A.K.A. Skinner was the head of that family, and he almost idolized his wife, who appeared to completely return his affection. Alas, sir, she was deceiving him. Her protestations of love were but honeyed lies, intended to gull and blind him. She had become infatuated with William Wagstaff, a neighbor, who had planned to capture her affections. She listened to Wagstaff's pleadings and fled with him, leaving her husband with a wrecked home and a broken heart. Can you not feel for me, sir?" "I do indeed," said the literary editor. I can conceive the agony, the sorrow, this deep suffering you must have felt." "For 2 months," continued the man, "the home of A.K.A. Skinner has been desolate, and this woman and Wagstaff have been flying from his wrath." "What do you intend to do?" asked the literary editor. "I scarcely know. I do not care for the woman any longer, but I cannot escape the tortures my mind is undergoing day after day." At this point, a shrill woman's voice was heard in the outer office, making some inquiry of the office boy. "Good heavens, her voice," said the man, rising to his feet, greatly agitated. "I must get out of here. Quick, is there no way for me to escape? A window, a side door, anywhere before she finds me." The literary editor rose with indignation in his face. "For shame, sir. Do not act so unworthy a part. Confront your faithless wife, Mr. Skinner, and denounce her for wrecking your life and home. Why do you hesitate to stand up for your honor and your rights?" "You do not understand," said the man, his face white with fear and anticipation, as he climbed out a window upon a shed roof. "I am William Wagstaff." Ooh. Well, Henry can really turn the screws when he wants to, can't he? Ah, and here's a man who's too wise. There is a man in Houston who keeps quite abreast of the times. He reads the papers, has traveled extensively, and is an excellent judge of human nature. He has a natural gift for detecting humbugs and fakirs. It would be a smooth artist indeed who could impose on him in any way. One night as he was going home, a shady-looking man with his hat pulled down over his eyes stepped out from a doorway and said, "Say, gent, here's a diamond ring I found in the gutter. I don't want to get into no trouble with it. Give me $1 and take it." The Houston man smiled as he looked at the flashy ring the man held towards him. "A very good game, my man," he said, "but the police are hot after you fellas. You'd better select your rhinestone customers with better judgment. Good night." When the man got home, he found his wife in tears. "Oh, John," she said, "I went shopping this afternoon and I lost my solitaire diamond ring. Oh, what shall I—" John turned without a word and rushed back down the street, but the shady-looking man was not to be found. His wife often wonders why he never scolded her for losing the ring. Let's see. Oh, yes. Book reviews. Unabridged Dictionary by Noah Webster, LLDFRS, XYZ, etc. We find on our table quite an exhaustive treatise on various subjects, written in Mr. Webster's well-known, lucid, and piquant style. There's not a dull line between the covers of the book. The range of subjects is wide, and the treatment light and easy without being flippant. A valuable feature of this work is the arranging of the articles in alphabetical order, thus facilitating the finding of a particular word desired. Mr. Webster's vocabulary is large, and he always uses the right word in the right place. Mr. Webster's work is thorough, and we predict that he will be heard from again. Houston City Directory by Morrison and Formley. This new book has the decided merit of being non-sensational. In these days of erotic and ultra-imaginative literature of the modern morbid self-analytical school, it is a relief to peruse this book with so little straining after effect, so well balanced and so pure in sentiment. It is a book that a man can place in the hands of the most innocent member of his family with the utmost confidence. Its text is healthy and its literary style excellent, and it adheres to the method used in such thrilling effects as by Mr. Webster in his famous dictionary. That is, alphabetical arrangement. We venture to assert that no one can carefully and conscientiously read this little volume without being a better man or lady, as circumstances over which they have no control may indicate. And let's see, here's a nice bit. Guessed everything else. A man with a long, sharp nose and a big bundle, which he carried by a strap, went up the steps to the gloomy-looking brick house. Set his bundle down, rang the bell, and took off his hat and wiped his brow. A woman answered the door, and he said, "Madam, I have a number of not only useful but necessary articles that I would like to show you. First, I want you to look at these elegant illustrated books of travel and biography written by the best authors. They sold only by subscription, and they were bounded. I don't care to see them. We have small children, eh? Well, madam, there are some building blocks that are very instructive and amusing. No? Well, let me show you some beautiful lace curtains for your sitting room. Handmade and a great bargain. I don't want them with smoking in the house. It won't injure them in the least. Just shake them out in the morning, and I guarantee not a vestige of tobacco smoke will remain. Here, I also have a very ingenious bell for awakening lazy servants in the morning. You simply touch a button, and I tell you, we have smart servants, have you? Well, that is a blessing. Now, here's a clothesline that is the wonders of the age. It needs no pins. It can be fastened to anything, fence, side of the house, or a tree. It can be raised or lowered in an instant. And for a large washing, this is the most convenient and labor-saving device. I say we have we have a small family. Let's see, then here I'm trying to tell you, said the woman, that we have smallpox in the family. And along those, man made a convulsive grab at his goods and rolled down the steps in about 2 seconds, while the woman softly closed the door just as the man got out of a buggy and nailed a yellow flag on the house. Sometimes it's good to let people interrupt you. Let's see, what other bits of fun do we have for today? Confessions of a Humorist. There was a painless stage of incubation that lasted 25 years. And then it broke out on me, and people said I was it. But they called it humor instead of measles. The employees of the store bought a silver inkstand for the senior partner on his 50th birthday. We crowded into his private office to present it. I had been selected for spokesman, and I made a little speech that I had been preparing for a week. It made a hit. It was full of puns and epigrams and funny twists that brought down the house, which was a very solid one in the wholesale hardware line. Old Marlowe himself actually grinned, and employees took their cue and roared. My reputation as a humorist dates from 9:30 on that morning. For weeks afterwards, my fellow clerks fanned the flame of my self-esteem. One by one, they came to me, saying what an awfully clever speech it was, old man, and carefully explained to me the point of each of my jokes. Gradually, I found I was expected to keep it up. Others might speak sanely on business matters and the day's topics, but from me, something gamesome and airy was required. I was expected to crack jokes about the crockery and lighten up the graniteware. I was second bookkeeper, and if I failed to show up a balance sheet without something comic about the footings, well, I could find no cause for laughter and an invoice of plows, the other clerks were disappointed. By degrees, my fame spread, and I became a local character. Our town was small enough to make this possible. The daily newspaper often quoted my sayings. At social gatherings, I was indispensable. I believe I did possess considerable wit and a facility for quick and spontaneous repartee. And the nature of it was kindly and genial, not running to sarcasm or offending others. People began to smile when they saw me coming. By the time we'd met, I generally had the word ready to broaden the smile into a laugh. I'd married early. We had a charming boy of 3 and a girl of 5. Naturally, we lived in a vine-covered cottage and were happy. My salary as bookkeeper in the hardware concern kept at a distance all those ill attendants upon superfluous wealth. At sundry times, I had written out a few jokes and conceits that I considered particularly happy and sent them to certain periodicals that print such things. All of them had been instantly accepted. Several of the editors had written to request further contributions. One day I received a letter from the editor of a famous weekly publication. He suggested that I submit to him a humorous composition to fill a column space, hinting that he would make it a regular feature of each issue if the work proved satisfactory. I did so, and at the end of 2 weeks, he offered to make a contract with me for a year at a figure that was considerably higher than the amount being paid me by the hardware firm. I was filled with delight. My wife already crowned me in her mind with the imperishable evergreens of literary success. We had lobster croquettes and a bottle of blackberry wine for dinner that night. Here was a chance to liberate myself from drudgery. I talked the matter over very seriously with Louisa. We agreed I must resign my place at the store and devote myself to humor. I resigned. My fellow clerks gave me a farewell banquet. The speech I made was wonderful. It was printed in full by the Gazette. The next morning, I woke and looked at the clock. Wait, by George, I exclaimed and grabbed for my clothes. Louisa reminded me I was no longer a slave to hardware and contractor supplies. I was now a professional humorist. After breakfast, she proudly led me to the little room off the kitchen. Dear girl, There was my table and chair, writing pad, ink, and pipe tray. And all the author's trappings. The celery stand full of fresh roses and honeysuckle, last year's calendar on the wall, the dictionary, and a little bag of chocolates to nibble between inspirations. Dear girl. I said, me to work. The wallpaper is fashioned with arabesques and obelisks, or is it trapezoids? Upon one of these figures, I fixed my eyes. I bethought myself of humor. A voice startled me. Louise's voice. If you aren't too busy, dear, come to dinner. I looked at my watch. Yes. 5 hours had been gathered in by the grim Seifman. I went to dinner. You must have worked too hard at first, said Louisa. Goethe, or was it Napoleon, said 5 hours a day is enough for mental labor. Couldn't you take me and the children to the woods this afternoon? I am a bit tired, I admitted, so we went to the woods. But I soon got the swing of it. Within a month, I was turning out copy as regular as shipments of hardware. And I had success. My column in the weekly made some stir. And I was referred to in some gossipy way by the critics as something fresh in the line of humorists. I augmented my income considerably by contributing to other publications. I picked up the tricks of the trade. I could make a funny idea and make a 2-line joke of it, earning $1. With false whiskers on, it could be served up cold as a quatrain, doubling its producing value. By turning the skirt and adding a ruffle of rhyme, you could hardly recognize it at all. With its neatly shod feet and asking for a fashion plate illustration. I began to save up money, and we had new carpets and a parlor organ. My townspeople began to look upon me as a citizen of some consequence instead of the merry trifler I had been when I clerked in the hardware store. After 5 or 6 months of spontaneity seems to depart from my humor. Quips and droll sayings no longer fell carelessly from my lips. I was sometimes hard run from material. I found myself listening to catch available ideas from the conversation of my friends. Sometimes I chewed my pencil and gazed at the wallpaper for hours, trying to build up some gay little bubble of unstudied fun. Then I became a harpy, a Moloch, a Jonah, a vampire to my acquaintances, anxious, haggard, greedy. I stood among them like a veritable killjoy. Let a bright saying, a witty comparison, become phrase fall from the lips, and I was after it like a hound springing upon a bone. I dared not trust my memory, but turning aside guiltily and meanly, I would make note of it in my ever-present memorandum book or upon my cuff for my own future use. My friends regard me in sorrow and wonder. I was not the same man. Where once I had furnished them with entertainment and jollity, I now preyed upon them. No jest for me ever bid for their smiles now. They were too precious. I could not afford to dispense gratuitously with the means of my livelihood. I was a fox, praising the singing of my friends, the crows, that they might drop from their beaks the morsels of wit that I coveted. Nearly everyone began to avoid me. I even forgot how to smile, not even paying that much for the sayings that I appropriated. No persons, places, times, or subjects were exempt from my plundering in search of material. Even in church, my demoralized fancy went hunting among the solemn aisles and pillars for spoils. Did the minister give out the long-meter doxology? At once I began doxology, sockadology, sockadendra, meet her. The sermon ran through my mental sieve. as its precepts filtering and unheeded, but could I but gleam a suggestion of a pun or a bon mot. Psalmist of anthems in the choir, but an accompaniment to my thoughts as I conceived new changes to ring among the ancient comicalities concerning the jealousies of soprano, tenor, and basso. My own home became a hunting ground. My wife is a singularly feminine creature, candid, sympathetic, and impulsive. Once, her conversation was my delight. Her ideas a source of unfailing pleasure. Now I worked her. She was a gold mine of those amusing but lovable inconsistencies that distinguish the female mind. I began to market these pearls of unwisdom and humor that should have enriched only the sacred precincts of home. With devilish cunning, I encouraged her to talk. Unsuspecting, she laid her heart bare. Upon the cold, conspicuous, common printed page, I offered it for the public gaze. Literary Judas, I kissed her and betrayed her. For pieces of silver, I dressed her sweet confidences in the pantels and frills and folly and made them dance in the marketplace. Dear Louisa, of nights I've bent over her, cruel as a wolf upon a tender lamb, hearkening even to her soft words murmured in sleep, hoping to catch an idea from my next day's grind. There's the worst yet to come. God help me. Next, my fangs would bury deep in the neck of the fugitive sayings of my little children. Guy and Viola were two bright fountains of childish, quaint thoughts and speech. I found a ready sale for this kind of humor and was furnishing a regular department in a magazine with funny fancies of childhood. I began to stalk them as an Indian stalks the antelope. I would hide behind sofas and doors or crawl on my hands and knees among the bushes in the yard to eavesdrop while they were on play. I had all the qualities of a harpy except remorse. Once, when I was barren of ideas and my copy must leave by the next mail, I covered myself in a pile of autumn leaves in the yard where I knew they intended to come to play. I cannot bring myself to believe that Guy was aware of my hiding place. But even if he was, I would be loath to blame him for setting the fire to the leaves, causing the destruction of my new suit of clothes and nearly cremating a parent. Soon, my own children began to shun me as a pest. Often, when I was creeping upon them like a melancholy ghoul, I would hear one of them say to the other, "Here comes Papa." And they would gather their toys and scurry away to some safer hiding place. Miserable wretch that I was. And yet I was doing well financially. Before the first year had passed, I'd saved $1,000 and we lived in comfort. But what a cost. I am not quite clear as to what a pariah is, but I was everything that it sounds like. I had no friends, no amusements, no enjoyments of life. The happiness of my family had been sacrificed. I was a bee sucking sordid honey from life's fairest flowers, dreaded and shunned on account of my sting. One day a man spoke to me with a pleasant and friendly smile. Not in months had the thing happen. I was passing the undertaking establishment of Peter Heffelbauer. Peter stood in the door and saluted me. I stopped, strangely wrung in my heart by his greeting. He asked me inside. The day was chill and rainy. We went into the back room where a fire burned in a little stove. A customer came and Peter left me alone for a while. Presently, I felt a new feeling stealing over me, a sense of beautiful calm and content. I looked around the place. There were rows of shining rosewood caskets, black palls, trestles, hearse plumes, mourning streamers, and all the paraphernalia of the solemn trade. Here was peace, order, silence, the abode of the grave, and dignified reflections. Here on the brink of life was a little niche pervaded by the spirit of eternal rest. When I entered it, the follies of the world abandoned me at the door. I felt no inclination to wrest a humorous idea from these somber and stately trappings. My mind just seemed to stretch itself to grateful repose upon a couch draped with gentle thoughts. Quarter of an hour ago, I was an abandoned humorist. Now I was a philosopher, full of serenity and ease. I had found a refuge from humor, from the hot chase of the sly quip, from the degrading pursuit of the panting joke, from the restless reach after the nimble repartee. I had not known Heffelbauer well. When he came back, I let him talk, fearful that he might prove to be a jarring note in the sweet, dirge-like harmony of his establishment. But no, he chimed truly. I gave a long sigh of happiness. Never have I known a man's talk to be as magnificently dull as Peter's was. Compared with it, the Dead Sea is a geyser. Never a sparkle or a glimmer of wit marred his words. Commonplaces as trite and plentiful as blackberries flowed from his lips, no more stirring in quality than last week's tape running from a ticker tape machine. Quaking a little, I tried upon him one of my best pointed jokes. It fell back, ineffectual, with the point broken. I loved that man from then on. 2 or 3 evenings a week, I would steal down to Heffelbauer's and revel in his back room. It was my only joy. I began to rise early and hurry through my work that I might spend more time in my haven. In no other place could I throw off my habit of extracting humorous ideas from my surroundings. Peter's talk left me no opening that I besieged it ever so hard. Under this influence, I began to improve in spirits. It was the recreation from one's labor that every man needs. I surprised 1 or 2 of my former friends by throwing them a smile and a cheery word as I passed them in the streets. Several times I dumbfounded my family by relaxing long enough to make a jocose remark in their presence. I had been so long ridden by the incubus of humor that I seized my hours of holiday with a schoolboy's zest. My work began to suffer. It was not the pain and burden to me that it had been. I often whistled at my work and wrote with far more fluency than before. I accomplished my tasks impatiently and was anxious to be off to my helpful retreat as a drunkard is to get to his tavern. My wife had some anxious hours in conjecturing where I spent my afternoons. I thought it best not to tell her. Women do not understand these things. Poor girl, she had one shock of it. One day I brought home a silver coffin handle for a paperweight and a fine fluffy hearse plume to dust my papers with. I loved to see them on my desk and think of the beloved room down at Heffelbauer's. But Louisa found them and shrieked with horror. I had to console her with some lame excuse for having them. But I saw in her eyes that the prejudice was not removed. I had to remove the articles, though, at double quick time. One day, Peter Heffelbauer laid before me a temptation that swept me off my feet. In his sensible, uninspired way, he showed me his books and explained that his profits and his business were increasing rapidly. He had thought of taking in a partner with some cash. He would rather have me than anyone he knew. When I left his place that afternoon, Peter had my check for the $1,000 I had in the bank, and I was a partner in his undertaking business. I came home with feelings of delirious joy, mingled with a certain amount of doubt. I was dreading to tell my wife about it, but I walked on air. To give up the writing of humorous stuff, to once more enjoy the apples of life, instead of squeezing them to a pulp for a few drops of hard cider to make the public feel funny. What a boon that would be. At the supper table, Louisa handed me some letters that had come in my absence. Several of them contained rejected manuscript. Ever since I first began going to Heffelbauer's, my stuff had been coming back with alarming frequency. Lately, I've been dashing off my jokes and articles with the greatest fluency. Previously, I had worked like a bricklayer, slowly and with agony. Presently, I opened the letter from the editor of the weekly with whom I had been with which I had a regular contract. The check for that weekly article were still our main dependents. The letter ran thus: Dear sir, as you're aware, our contract for the year expires with the present month. While regretting the necessity for so doing, we must say we do not care to renew same for the coming year. We are quite pleased with your style of humor, which seems to have delighted a large proportion of our readers. But for the past 2 months, we have noticed a decided falling off in its quality. Your earlier work showed a spontaneous, easy, natural flow of fun and wit. Of late, it is labored, studied, and unconvincing, giving painful evidence of hard toil and drudging mechanism. Again, regretting that we do not consider your contributions available any longer, we are yours sincerely, the editor. I handed my letter to my wife. As she read it, her face grew extremely long, and there were tears in her eyes. The mean old thing, she exclaimed indignantly. I'm sure your pieces are just as good as they ever were. It doesn't take you half as long to write them as it did. And then, I suppose, Louisa thought of the checks that would cease coming. Oh, John, she wailed, what will you do now? For answer, I got up and began to do a polka step around the dinner table. I'm sure Louisa thought the trouble had driven me mad. I think the children had hoped they had, for they tore after me, yelling with glee and emulating my steps. I was now something like their old playmate of yore. The theater for us tonight, I shouted, nothing less than a late, wild, disreputable supper for us all at the Palace Restaurant. Lumpty diddly diddly dum. And then I explained my glee that by the cry I was now a partner in a prosperous undertaking establishment. And that written jokes might go hide their heads in sackcloth and ashes for all me. With the editor's letter in her hand to justify the deed I'd done, my wife could advance no objections except a few mild words based on the feminine inability to appreciate a good thing, such as the little back room of Peter of Heffelbauer and Company's undertaking establishment. In conclusion, I will say that today you will find no man in our town as well liked, as jovial, and as full of merry sayings as I. My jokes are again noised about and quoted. Once more, I take pleasure in my wife's confidential chatter without a mercenary thought. And Guy and Viola play at my feet, distributing gems of childish humor without fear of the ghastly tormentor who used to dog their steps, notebook in hand. Our business has prospered finely. I keep the books and look after the shop, while Peter attends to the outside matters. He says that my levity and high spirits could simply turn any funeral into an Irish wake. Well, not bad. Suppose we can stop there for today. And we'll have a few other gems for next week. So on behalf of Washburn Public Library and O. Henry, thanks for coming, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.